Tonight we begin with a moment that Western intelligence sources are quietly calling unprecedented, possibly the most psychologically devastating operation Ukraine has executed in the entire three-year war. This was not a strike on a military base, not an ammunition depot, not a command center. This was something far more personal. A message delivered deliberately, precisely, and unmistakably. What Ukraine did crossed a line the Kremlin itself had warned would trigger catastrophic retaliation, a red line drawn publicly, repeated often, and meant to intimidate. And yet, when that line was crossed, Moscow did not respond with fury. It did not respond with shock and awe. It responded with silence, complete, controlled, and deeply revealing silence. Less than 48 hours ago, Ukrainian forces executed a precision operation that reached striking distance of Vladimir Putin's personal Black Sea palace, a billion-dollar compound that symbolizes everything Putin has built, everything he has taken, and everything he fears losing. Tonight, we now understand what happened, why it happened, and why Western intelligence agencies believe this moment marks a turning point in the war. This is the story of how Ukraine brought the war directly to Putin's doorstep. Imagine the scene. It is 3:47 a.m. on a moonless night along Russia's Black Sea coast. Inside a heavily fortified estate near Gelendzhik, security personnel sit before glowing screens tracking radar feeds and air defense systems. This is no ordinary residence. The compound includes vineyards, a private theater, underground facilities, and layers of classified security infrastructure. It is among the most protected pieces of real estate in the Russian Federation. The estate covers more than 17,000 square meters and sits beneath a defense network designed to be impenetrable. Oversight of this protection falls to the highest levels of Russia's security establishment, aerospace commanders responsible for air defense, naval leadership providing early warning from the Black Sea, and elite Federal Protective Service units tasked with guarding Putin's personal properties. Billions of dollars, decades of doctrine, and countless careers rest on a single promise: nothing gets through. That night, something did. Ukrainian drones entered Russian airspace in a formation that initially looked familiar. At first, operators believed this was another probing action, a routine attempt to test response times, map radar coverage, and expose weaknesses. These kinds of incursions had happened before. But within minutes, confusion turned into alarm. The drones were not diverting toward military installations. They were not approaching logistics hubs or infrastructure targets. They were flying straight toward the most protected private residence in Russia. The systems designed to prevent exactly this scenario, S-400 batteries, pantsir defense units, electronic warfare platforms, began to fail in sequence. Radar coverage flickered. Tracking solutions broke down. Interceptors missed their marks. One by one, Ukrainian projectiles penetrated the defensive envelope. Multiple impacts were recorded within the inner security perimeter of Putin's personal compound. For nearly 18 months, intelligence agencies had been picking up subtle signals, not official declarations, not public threats, but quiet indicators that Ukraine was preparing something different. Ukraine had been aggressive before, but always within a recognizable pattern. Their strikes avoided leadership symbolism. They maintained plausible deniability. They stayed within limits that kept Western allies comfortable. Then, suddenly, the pattern went dark. Western analysts noticed unusual movements of long-range drone units. Electronic warfare assets were repositioned. Specialized operators were quietly recalled from other fronts. Communications channels that normally buzzed with activity fell silent. When Ukrainian command goes operationally quiet, intelligence professionals know it usually means one thing: something significant is coming. Ukrainian leadership reached a conclusion that following the old rules would lead only to slow defeat, continued losses, and eventual exhaustion. If Putin could believe his personal world remained untouchable, while Ukrainian cities burned nightly, that imbalance had to end. The psychological sanctuary Putin relied upon, the belief that war would never truly reach him, had to be shattered. And along the Black Sea coast, it was, according to satellite imagery and signals intelligence reviewed by Western defense officials, Ukraine launched a coordinated drone swarm involving approximately a dozen to 15 long-range UAVs. These included modified commercial platforms and domestically produced systems designed specifically to overwhelm Russian air defenses. The objective was not simply to strike, but to saturate radar systems, blind early warning networks, and ensure penetration. The operation required months of reconnaissance, identifying radar gaps, understanding S-400 tracking limitations, and mapping response timelines. Electronic warfare assets temporarily disrupted Russian sensors. Pre-programmed flight paths exploited known weaknesses in Russian tracking algorithms, ensuring that at least some drones would reach their objective. Western intelligence officials immediately recognized the implications. This was not a reckless act. It was authorized at the highest levels of Ukrainian command, with full awareness that striking so close to Putin's personal residence would be interpreted as a direct challenge. This was escalation by design, not emotional, not impulsive, but calculated. What followed made the operation even more significant. Within hours, Ukrainian forces launched additional strikes across Crimea, targeting air defense batteries that had been repositioned to protect the Black Sea coast. Radar installations were hit. Command nodes were degraded. Ammunition storage sites feeding coastal defenses were destroyed. In effect, Ukraine targeted the very systems that were meant to prevent future penetrations. This sequencing matters. The palace-adjacent strike was not symbolic theater. It was the opening move in a broader operational campaign. Ukraine demonstrated not only that it could breach Russia's most sensitive defenses, but that it could immediately exploit the weaknesses revealed by that breach. And Moscow's response revealed more than any statement ever could. There was no massive retaliation, no dramatic escalation, no new weapons systems unleashed. Instead, the Kremlin went quiet, defensive assets were reshuffled, internal investigations were launched. Blame began circulating quietly within military and security circles. Even Russian military bloggers, usually quick to amplify official narratives, expressed frustration at the lack of response. This silence is not confidence. It is uncertainty. Intelligence analysts now believe the operation was designed to test the credibility of Russian deterrence itself. Ukraine wanted to see whether Putin's red lines were real or rhetorical, whether the promised catastrophic retaliation would materialize, whether Western allies would recoil. None of that happened. Russia did not unleash devastation. Western governments did not condemn Ukraine. And Putin's threats were exposed as hollow. The most profound impact of this operation is psychological. Putin has built his political identity around invulnerability, projecting power outward while remaining personally insulated from consequence. This strike shattered that illusion. Putin cannot publicly acknowledge what happened without admitting his defenses failed. But he also cannot truly ignore it because his own security services know they failed. That contradiction creates internal tension, finger-pointing, quiet purges, and growing mistrust within the system designed to protect him. Defense analysts describe this as a dangerous psychological corner. Leaders placed in such positions historically respond in one of two ways: restraint born of fear or escalation driven by desperation. Ukraine, meanwhile, demonstrated confidence, precision, control, the ability to dictate tempo rather than react. That matters because wars are not won only by territory or firepower, but by momentum and belief. History offers clear parallels. In 1942, a small group of American bombers struck Tokyo in the Doolittle raid. The physical damage was minimal, but the psychological shock was enormous. It forced Japan to divert resources and reshaped strategic thinking. In 1987, a teenage pilot landed a small plane beside the Kremlin walls, exposing the gap between Soviet claims and reality. The political fallout was severe. What happened near Putin's Black Sea palace fits that pattern: a limited strike producing outsized psychological consequences. Tonight, one thing is undeniable. Ukraine has shown it can strike anywhere. Russian air defenses have been exposed, red lines have been crossed, and nothing happened. The Kremlin is quiet, too quiet. And when the Kremlin falls silent like this, it means calculations are underway. Reconsideration, reassessment, planning. Because Vladimir Putin has learned something he never wanted to know. His palace is not untouchable. His threats are not absolute. And the war he unleashed is no longer safely distant. It has come home.